Yeah.
So CM Punk did his one and only interview going into Collision with Mark Raimondi from ESPN. And there was a lot of discussion in the lead up what was going to be contained in this interview. And Wei, you've had a chance to read the story, as have I. What would be your overall takeaway from this story? And did anything strike you as glaring within this story?
Glaring. I mean, certainly it's the first that we've heard of him, and I think the most information we've had from Punk from really
outside of an Instagram story.
Yeah, I would honestly say maybe any of the characters involved directly. It's the most, like, we haven't heard Kenny speak about maybe the incident itself.
A little bit on Renee's podcast, but again, it was under the guise of we cannot talk about it and speaking in sort of vagueness. I would say this is the most of the principles involved, like an on the record account, while not going into like the fight backstage. It seems that is pretty off limits.
Beyond that, like, just maybe giving us a bit of an update about like the course of where things are right now. I think, one of the standout things, and I found it very interesting that Punk even decided to kind of like broach the idea, or at least the fact from his point that he's been trying to make amends, or he's at least trying to sit down with everybody else to try to hammer this thing out. And for whatever reason, he's been denied that opportunity.
He's been told not to contact them, which it sounds like through whether it's legal representatives, but there have been those that have told Punk not to contact them. So this is Punk's side that he would like to sit down and air everything out. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a necessity that you would want as a company for all of these parties to, even if you're not looking at the ultimate of we have to work together, the idea that we have to coexist. And instead of this perception to the outside that you are bringing in these two parties that are not going to cross one another and they are going to be kept in separate corners of their room and nothing is going to flare up. And this is, to many, that would seem like this is just a countdown clock that is ticking by the week before you are going to inevitably have to address the root problem. So, I mean, I imagine that there's a lot of frustration on both sides of what they can say, what they cannot say. It's worth note. How did you read? A lot of focus was on kind of the Hangman Page stuff that I'm sure you can read that with a skeptical eye of what is Punk's angle here, that this could have been very much of the idea of him just legitimately sharing his belief of what he felt in that match. It also could be the idea of, I'm coming back to work and I'm keeping all options open here to know that there's money at the end of all of this, that me working with a guy like to summarize.
You can't help but look at any of this with that potential. It's professional wrestling.
Okay. And that's why the paragraph no one's going to focus on is right at the beginning. And his quote, "I know pro wrestling is absolutely the most bizarre form of entertainment on earth, but to me, I treat it like a business and I treat it like the television show that it is." And I think that was maybe one of the most honest lines you are going to get from a CM Punk that you can completely understand. And if you have not read the article, essentially everyone knows the story about the promo going into Double or Nothing and what that set off. And then Punk's response months later when he came back from the injury. But in this, of course, he had he's stating that he was questioning whether he would even go forward with this match with Hangman at Double or Nothing. That's when he used the line about jeopardizing $1 million house and what he was alluding to. And then in the match, believing that Hangman may have been extra stiff with him. And there's a spot that people have isolated where there's kind of a chop that goes like to the face of Punk.
It wasn't necessarily him suggesting Hangman was being extra stiff. It was a shot that ended up certainly felt stiff, and he was more so commenting.
Chipped his tooth.
Right, but he doesn't know if Hangman was intentional with the stiff shot. What he's saying is he started questioning himself or questioning Hangman's motivations throughout the match, and that led to him not being able to give a great performance. Right. And in a professional wrestling context, you never want to have somebody, in that sort of situation.
And you can only get into, there's one person that can answer that. That's Hangman Page, who is not like appears to be bound by any of this, that he is like, he was not part of the suspensions and he wasn't part of the brawl backstage, that he has, and he has kept an extremely low profile during all of these months.
If you could say he's bound by anything, maybe it's just, whatever loyalty he has to the company and not wanting to, make this thing possibly worse by, fanning the flames anymore through the media. I found it maybe, this is probably already like under a lot of people's assumptions, but to maybe hear it directly from Punk's mouth, when he said that the two of them had a meeting about the promo beforehand, and Paige basically went out there and blindsided Punk with that line. I think at least knowing that factor, at least hearing it from Punk's perspective, for me, it does kind of recolor how I look at that particular scene. I can totally understand why Punk would be so pissed off. When you talk about a plan in the back and then you come out in front of the cameras and you're, basically you're two-timing me, you're screwing me by putting me in an uncomfortable situation. I could see why he'd be pissed off. That is no excuse. Definitely. But that's no excuse for how he handled it and how he retaliated after. No,
and again, like this whole story is not binary where it's just right, wrong. There is, it's all gray. And with the Hangman promo, I think we certainly would have to look at the context of this, in that it's not as though they're sitting down with a script and going over this stuff. We know that that's not the case. This is bullet points, and at the end of the day, you're trying to sell conflict for a pay-per-view that's coming up that weekend. It's that time of the show where we tell you about the Post Wrestling Cafe, the best place to drop your $6 every month for bonus content.
It's a busy week this week. We've got the double shot with our Dark Side of the Ring review. We've got Rewind Away on Thursday, Rewind a SmackDown on Friday, and on Saturday, a brand new show.
It's the launch of our new weekly AEW Collision review with 2 hosts that will be joining me. Go to postwrestlingcafe.com and video.postwrestling.com to subscribe.